Hello and welcome to our continuous study of the book of James, and we are in lesson 7. Thank you for being part of this study. James is not really that long a book, and so we're going to be done before you know it. I understand our next study is the book of Luke, and I think this study's about parables of Jesus. So we got a lot of good stuff ahead of us after we trudged through the book of Judges for months. But take your Bible study book, your curriculum, and I'm in the regular print book. I haven't graduated yet to large print, but I'm on page 61 as we start. Lesson number 7, the right kind of wisdom is the title of the lesson. It's in James 3, verses 13 through 18. I'm going to comment further on this title. You know, we can disagree with titles of Sunday school lessons and have our own opinion. That's okay. I may not be particularly right on everything. That's okay. But the main idea of the lesson is do not allow your hearts to turn into hate. You can become bitter or better, which I thought was interesting because I didn't read anything in the lesson that had to do with that. But we'll get down to the main idea, I promise you, as we get going. I did like the quick read. It says, James contrasted the foolish wisdom of the world with godly wisdom from above. And that's really what the lesson is about. I've sometimes sat through sermons and sat through Sunday school lessons and go, what was that person trying to say? What was the main point there? And that's why I normally put the main idea or a quick read out there at the beginning to make sure we really do get what the lesson is about and get it pretty quick. That tends to help. Let's do a little bit of introduction, like I always do. First thing is I thought it'd be good to come up with a definition of wisdom. And this was not an easy task. I read and I read, and I finally found one that I settled on. But there's a lot of ideas about what real wisdom is, what godly wisdom is. So here's what I came up with. And I think this just came right out of the curriculum, even though I Googled it and read about it and did all that kind of stuff. Godly wisdom knows what to do, how to do it. It knows it must be done. I thought that was pretty good. It also has an element of discernment. And you probably need to underline that word discernment or really make note of that because it cannot come from one's own resources. It's like it comes from God. Real wisdom is not something that I just have. It comes from the Lord. It's from God and it's from God alone. So let me read that again. Godly wisdom knows what to do, how to do it, and knows it must be done. It also has an element of discernment that cannot come by one's own resources. It's from God and God alone. I personally don't like the whole idea uh, of worldly wisdom. I don't think that a worldly person who doesn't know the Lord can have wisdom. Uh, to me, a lost person who does not recognize the person of Jesus for who he is, and who doesn't accept that reality into his own life, is certainly not a person of wisdom. And so I'll go along with the lesson, and you kind of know where I stand on that. But I don't think there's such thing as worldly wisdom. They can have knowledge, experience. They may be extremely smart, but they're not a wise person if they don't know the Lord. Just me, my opinion. I'm entitled. So anyway, park that somewhere and think about that. You know, wisdom is really a Bible word. It's a good Bible word. It's an Old Testament word. Worldly people don't have that kind of wisdom. They may have experience or insight, but they don't have wisdom. To reject the Lord is certainly not wisdom. So I believe that wisdom is gained through prayer, through study and time and hard work. And where I'm coming from is not a fruit of the Spirit. I went and read the fruits of the Spirit again in Galatians, and the Spirit, fruits of the Spirit, are things that you are just given. You don't work for it. When you receive the Spirit into your life, it's a gift. And it's something that the Lord puts in you that comes out because you have the Spirit. Well, wisdom's not that way. We do have to work to gain wisdom, and it takes time, and it takes work, and it takes effort. So park that too and think about it. Let's go ahead and get into the text now. I divided it up a little bit different than the curriculum did as far as how they laid out the lesson. I think that James is speaking a lot about what is not wisdom, and secular people, secular minded people who don't know the Lord, the things that comes out in their life because of the source of their strife. And then he contrasted that with really godly wisdom. Okay, I think that's how you should divide the lesson up. So I did a little bit different, and he basically makes a list of the fruits of both of those things that you see in a person who doesn't have wisdom, and things that you see in a person who does have wisdom. Okay, and so big long list. So that's kind of how I divided the lesson up. So let's look at it. Chapter 3, 14 through 16. We're going to come back to verse 1 because he has some terminology in there that I think fits better in the second section of it. But let's look at it. But if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast about it or deny the truth. Such, quote, wisdom does not come down from heaven, but is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. For where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder and every evil practice. So he's got a lot of words here that define a person that does not have wisdom. Okay? The first word that I noticed, and I titled this section, The Fruits of Worldly Wisdom. um, the first word that kind of stood out to me was bitter envy. Bitter envy. And this is deep rooted where it's been there a while, and you're envious of another person or what they have, and you want it. And it's not a thing like you admire that person. You're envious of that person, and it's a bitterness. And bitterness is a rotten seed, isn't it? Bitterness in a person is palatable. And it's a sad thing when you see it in a person that they're bitter. And you just say, Lord, help that person to move beyond that. He's building kind of on the same themes where you desire something that you don't have, and instead of working hard for it and changing your life and changing your attitude to get it, you become bitter about it. So the second word that he uses is selfish ambition. If you're a believer, you care more about other people than you do yourself, and you want good for them. And James says that the seed of worldly wisdom is selfish ambition. I don't even like that word, worldly wisdom. I don't think there's such a thing, but it is worldly, but it's not wisdom. Boasting. See how it's all self-centered? It's not about the other person. It's about me and how good I am and what I want. And he says it's earthly, it's unspiritual, and it's demonic. It's not beautiful and clean and nice. It's not from the Father. It's from another source that's evil. And this person's not being ruled by their relationship to the Lord. they're being ruled by something that's more sinister than that. He says it's also one characteristic of this this worldly wisdom is disorder. God is a God of order. Uh, he put things in order. All of nature is ordered. Even in a storm, it's ordered. One of the symbols and characteristics of a believer is order. We order our life, where our life is not in chaos. That was one of the problems with the church at Corinth that Paul disliked so much, is there was so much disorder. And he goes after them about that issue. And one last thing that he mentions is every evil practice. This is evil. And it's a practice in that it's over and over again. These evil things come out of the life of a person who doesn't have the right kind of wisdom. Well, uh, you can see there that he lists a lot of characteristics of a person who doesn't have really godly spiritual wisdom. I'm going to use those terms interchangeably. Well, let's go look now at the fruits of a godly person, a person with godly wisdom. Um, Verse 13 and then 17 through 18. Who is wise and understanding among you? Let them show it by their good life, by deeds done in humility that comes from wisdom. Isn't that beautiful? Um, you're going to see it through a good life and deeds done in humility, not for themselves, but for another person. And it comes from real wisdom. Look at verses 17 and 18. But the wisdom that comes from heaven, see, James loves to think about things coming down, okay? Every perfect gift comes down. All these blessings from God come down. That's part of his thinking. It's kind of like me saying, it is what it is. Something I say, and I mean by that, well, here we are. Well, James always talks about it. These things coming down. Well, but the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure. It's pure. Then peace loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit. See how positive these things are? Impartial and sincere. People who have godly wisdom are peacemakers who sow in peace, and then they reap a harvest of righteousness. Well, let's look at these great individuals who have true godly spiritual wisdom. James says that they live a good life. A good life. That's God's plan for you, is a good life. To be happy. To be about good things. To be satisfied with what you have. And just live a good life. Not be chasing the wrong things, but the right things. Second thing he says is deeds done in humility. Not looking for somebody to pat you on the back or you to be very public with what you're doing, but it's deeds done in humility, putting the needs of another person before your own, not looking after yourself. He says that it's pure. It's reflected by pure things, godly things, clean things, beautiful things. It's peace loving, always wanting peace, valuing peace. Some folks seem to always be stirring the pot, always in the middle of some type of argument or some problem. James says that a person of real wisdom is peace loving. He also says they're considerate. Is there a theme going on here? You kind of getting this? Putting the needs of another person. Jesus did that. If you're going to be Christ-like, you can't be self-centered. Got to slay that sin and get it out of your life. They're considerate. They're submissive. We studied Ephesians in our step-by-step through the New Testament class, and we read that verse in in Ephesians where, Paul says, submit to one another. And then he talks about wives, submit to your husband. And husbands, love your wife as Jesus loves the church, which, wow, that's big love. That's great love. But submissive, not wanting your way all the time. Doesn't mean you're walked over, but it does mean you want good for everyone. He next says a person of spiritual wisdom is full of mercy. And I always think this, we are really quick to give people mercy where we think they might be somehow innocent of something that they didn't turn out well. But true mercy is forgiving people who are guilty. That's the kind of mercy that God has. And people who have wisdom are quick to forgive and very quick to give people mercy, no matter if they were guilty or innocent. He says they have good fruit. It's obvious. You can see. One of the things I want you to think about is all of these things are outward things. They're not inward. Yeah, you've got to have it inside, and what's inside comes out. But these are all things that you can see that are exhibited in the life of a person. Good fruit. Fruit's not hidden. It's right out there for everyone to see. You can see it. James goes on and says that they're impartial. They're impartial. They want good for both people. And so they're going to treat everybody the same. They're sincere. It comes from a good place. He says at the end, he says, they sow in peace and they reap of harvest of righteousness. Do you sow peace? I hope you do. I hope you're a person of godly wisdom who sows peace, because you're going to harvest something with your life, either positive or negative. Those who sow peace reap of harvest of righteousness. All right, let's look at our truths this week. What can we learn? What's the real teachings of this passage? First thing is, godly wisdom is known by its fruit, and it's different than worldly knowledge. It's different. It comes from God. I don't believe that there's such thing as worldly wisdom. Just me. Second thing is, we can grow in wisdom, and that time and experience help you to have insight. I, I, I hope we're growing in wisdom. That's God's will for us. I hope I have more wisdom today than when I was a 20-year-old college student. I hope I have more wisdom today as a parent than I do when I was 23, first semester of seminary, and my 35 now-year-old son was born. He now has 3 children and is 35 years old. He thinks he's old. He's not old. I tell him, well, add 25 years to that 35 and we'll talk about it. But you can grow in your wisdom. And so let's grow. Third truth is, lost people do not possess true spiritual wisdom. If they did, they would receive Jesus. How can you have wisdom when you reject the person of the greatest truth who ever lived? I don't think it's possible. Last thing is, spiritual wisdom is both internal and external. People who possess it, it's obvious. This type of wisdom isn't hidden under a rock. People see it, people recognize it. Okay? The person's not flaunting it, it's just who they are. Let me give you an example. I have a great friend who's a Sunday school teacher. She's a pastor's wife, and she spent her whole adult life supporting her pastor, just a godly woman. And she's just a true person of God. And she's loved. She loves people. Great person of wisdom. And she's not a person that just goes around and states what she thinks about everything, but she's always doing great, wonderful things for people. Just yesterday, I saw her 3 times yesterday. Okay, she doesn't live in this church office like I do, but I saw her 3 times. Um, I saw her come into the office to get ready for a Sunday school lesson, and she was working on it. And this is Monday, okay? She's getting ready for next week's lesson because she does this a lot, okay? Um, I saw her car was parked in the parking lot most of the day. That means she was doing church things, okay? Um, and then I saw her at a visitation last night for a church member that we lost to COVID. And she was there just loving that family. And this is kind of what she does full time. She's a grandmother. She's a great grandmother. She's very busy, but she's a person of wisdom. She doesn't flaunt it, but people know it, and it's not hidden under a rock where it's inside of her. It's something that just comes out naturally, and I recognize it, and other people do too. So it's internal and external. James is an external person. He's like, yeah, faith is great, but show me some works. Well, true spiritual wisdom comes out, and you can see it. Let me pray with you. Jesus, we love you. We know that if we lack wisdom, we can ask you for it, and you will give it freely. So we're asking. I pray that we would grow more and more in wisdom, and that it would not be about us, but it would be spread among people who need some wisdom. Lord, in this world, we need wisdom today. So, Lord, give it to us. In your name I pray. Amen. You have a great week.